What happens when the man who owns 17 floral boutiques goes undercover and realizes his employees don't even know when they're being cut from the schedule? Owen Hartley had inherited the flower chain from his mother, a woman who'd built the business from a single shop in her garage. He remembered being a kid stuffing tissue paper into bouquet boxes at the kitchen table. But now, at 38, Owen was CEO of a company that had grown into 17 storefronts across 3 states. He wasn't proud of how far he'd drifted from the front lines. Lately, something had been gnawing at him. Not a single complaint or email, just a feeling. Sales were steady, but customer retention had dipped. A few employees had quit back-to-back at one location in Long Beach. His district manager, Tony, claimed it was just flaky part-timers. But Owen knew better than to trust a spreadsheet over people. He decided to go see it for himself. The Long Beach shop was one of the newer stores, opened 3 years ago. He'd never visited it in person, and none of the employees had ever met him. The team had only seen his name on company newsletters. Perfect. He shaved off his beard, dyed his hair a darker brown, and wore thick glasses that made him look like a tired grad student. He told Tony he was sending a temp named Daniel to help the shop for a week. No one suspected a thing. Owen showed up on a Monday morning, just before 9. The store smelled like roses and eucalyptus. A bell above the door jingled as he stepped inside. A young woman behind the counter looked up. "You the new guy?" "Yep, Daniel," he said, offering a hand. "Paige," she said, shaking it. "Don't mind the mess. We got slammed over the weekend and the cooler's still a disaster." She turned back to organizing vases without missing a beat. She was quick, sharp, and clearly exhausted. Another employee, a guy in his 40s named Louis, was sweeping near the front window. He gave a short nod but didn't say much. Paige showed him around cooler, prep table, register. She didn't slow down. Owen jumped in, helping unpack a shipment of lilies and strip thorns from roses. "You worked in flowers before?" Paige asked. "A little, mostly small stuff," he said, keeping it vague. She snorted. "You'll learn fast here, just don't screw up the wedding orders. That's what gets people fired." Noted. The day moved fast. Customers came in for birthday bouquets, condolence arrangements, last-minute anniversary saves. Owen watched how Paige handled each one with real care. Louis was quieter but reliable. But what really caught Owen's attention was the shift change. At 2, another worker named Lacey came in. She looked surprised to see Paige still there. "Thought you were off at 1. Paige gave a tired laugh. "Yes, well, Jenna texted me last night and cut my hours this week. I'm only on for 4 today." "Again?" Lacey asked. "Yup, 3rd time this month." Later, when Owen got a second with her in the back, he asked, "Hey, is that normal? Getting your hours changed like that?" Paige shrugged. "Depends who's managing that week. Jenna's been cutting people day of, says she needs to balance labor costs." "Does she tell you ahead of time?" "Nope, usually a text the night before. Sometimes not even that. You just show up and find your name gone from the schedule." "That sounds rough." Paige chuckled, but there was frustration behind it. "Honestly, I'm just trying to stick it out until I can get something more stable. I love the work, but can't make rent on 20 hours a week." Owen didn't say much, he just nodded. That night, he sat in his car in the parking lot, the disguise still on. His hands were still stained green from flower stems. He stared at the glow of the shop through the windows. No one had told him employees were getting their hours cut last minute. No notice, no explanation, just quietly pushed off the schedule. He texted Tony, heading back to the hotel, "We'll update you at the end of the week." But he wasn't going back to the hotel. He was going to see how deep this went. Tomorrow he'd come in early, and he'd be watching. Owen arrived the next morning before the doors opened. The lights were still off inside, but Paige's car was already parked out front. He waited until she unlocked the door, then followed her in, helping carry in a box of coffee cups she'd brought from a nearby diner. "Morning," she said, rubbing her eyes. "Hope you're ready for a busy one. Jenna's not coming in again." It took Owen a second to recognize the name. Paige had mentioned it the day before the supervisor responsible for cutting hours without warning. "She call out?" Owen asked, setting the box on the counter. "No," Paige said, flipping the breaker for the cooler lights. "She just doesn't come in unless there's a wedding order or the district manager's doing a walkthrough. We're basically on our own most days." That made things clearer. Owen had assumed Jenna was micromanaging from inside the store. Instead, she was controlling everything remotely, and employees were left scrambling. The first customer walked in at 9:15. After that, it didn't let up. By 10:30, the floor was covered in clippings, and the phone rang nonstop. Paige took 3 orders in a row while Owen prepped stems and boxed arrangements. Lacey arrived just before noon, already pulling on her apron as she stepped behind the counter. "You're on register," Paige said, barely pausing. "Haven't eaten and Lewis called out. Again." Owen glanced at her. "You want me to take register for a bit?" She hesitated, then nodded. "You know what? Yeah, Lacey, can you help this guy with the bouquet wrap? I'll be in the back for 10. But she didn't come back in 10 minutes. It took nearly 30, and when she returned, she looked pale. "You okay?" Owen asked quietly as she passed by. "Just low blood sugar," she muttered. "Didn't have time to pack anything." He didn't push, but made a note of it. Customers kept coming. By mid-afternoon, the phone rang with a large same-day delivery order 6 centerpieces for a corporate dinner. The catch? They needed them in 4 hours. Owen offered to handle the prep. Paige agreed, but when he asked who was doing the delivery, she frowned. "Should be Jenna. Her name's on the van log for today, but she hasn't answered any of my messages." "Is there a backup?" "Nope, she has the only key to the van." Owen wiped his hands on a towel. "We're going to miss the delivery window." "Yup." He kept his voice steady. "Is this normal?" "This," Paige said, letting out a short breath, "this is predictable." By 5, they'd managed to finish the arrangements and convinced the customer to pick them up. Paige apologized profusely over the phone, offering a discount, but Owen could hear the wear in her voice. After closing, while Lacey mopped the floors, Paige sat on the back step of the shop, sipping water and staring into the alley. Owen stepped outside, sitting beside her. The evening was quiet, except for the buzz of a distant delivery truck. "You've been holding this place together," he said. She looked at him sideways. "Don't get sentimental, it's just work." "It's not just work when you're doing 3 jobs." "Yeah, well, someone's gotta make sure the customers get what they paid for." He paused. "What about the district manager? Doesn't Tony step in when things fall apart?" She gave a humorless laugh. "Tony, please, he's Jenna's friend. They worked together in Torrance before this. If you complain, it doesn't go anywhere. I tried, once." "What happened?" "She cut my hours the next week, said it was a budget thing. Got the message." Owen looked down at his hands. His stomach turned, but he kept his face even. A door slammed somewhere nearby. Paige stood, brushing off her jeans. "Anyway, I should get home. My roommate's cat threw up on my shoes this morning. Gotta deal with that." Owen watched her go, then walked back inside. Lacey was finishing up at the register. "You riding the bus again?" he asked her. She nodded. "Last one leaves in 20. I'm good." He offered to walk with her to the stop. On the way, he asked, "You been here long?" 7 months, she said. "I like it. I mean, I like flowers, but it's been rough lately. Jenna's barely here and they keep changing the schedule without telling us. Do you ever talk to Tony? Tried once. He told me I needed to build resilience, so now I just keep my mouth shut. The next morning, Owen arrived even earlier, before sunrise. He waited in his car, watching the lot. At 7:30, a black SUV pulled in. A woman stepped out, sunglasses on, coffee in hand. She unlocked the shop, went inside, and didn't come out for 30 minutes. It had to be Jenna. Owen slipped in through the back entrance, changing into his apron before stepping into the front. Jenna was at the counter, scrolling through her phone. She barely looked up. You're the temp. Daniel, he said. Don't touch the register. That's Lacey's job, and don't rearrange the display table. Just fixed it. She didn't ask about his experience or introduce herself. She didn't acknowledge Paige when she came in 10 minutes later, just disappeared into the back and closed the office door. All day, Jenna stayed in the back. Occasionally, she came out to grab a drink from the mini fridge, but otherwise she said nothing to anyone. Paige and Lacey managed the floor. Owen watched as they kept the store running while their supervisor stayed silent. At one point, a customer came in to pick up a funeral arrangement. It wasn't ready. Jenna had taken the order herself. Her handwriting was on the order sheet but hadn't added it to the prep list. Paige apologized and got to work immediately, but the woman was upset. She'd driven 40 minutes. Jenna, still in the back, didn't come out once to explain. After the customer left, Paige turned to Owen. Her hands were shaking slightly. That's the third time this month she's missed a funeral order. Owen nodded. I saw. He waited until the end of the day. After the last customer left, he walked to the back office and knocked. Jenna opened the door halfway. We closed. Yes. You need something. Owen looked at her for a long second. I need you to come out front. She raised an eyebrow but followed him. Paige and Lacey were wiping down surfaces. Lewis had shown up in the afternoon and was finishing the trash run. Owen pulled off his glasses and ran a hand through his hair. My name isn't Daniel, he said, loud enough for the room to hear. I'm Owen Hartley. I own this company. The room fell completely silent. Jenna blinked, then forced a laugh. Wait, you're what? The owner. Paige, Lacey, Lewis, you've all been working with me this week. Paige froze. Lacey dropped the rag she was holding. I wanted to see how the store was really running, Owen continued, and what I saw was unacceptable. Jenna crossed her arms. Well, if you told me you were coming. I didn't want to be told what you thought I wanted to hear. I wanted to see how you treated people when you thought no one was watching. She tried to speak again, but he held up a hand. You've been cutting hours without notice, missing critical orders, and leaving the team to run this place while you sit in the office. You've ignored calls, skipped shifts, and created a culture where people are afraid to speak up. Jenna's mouth opened, but no words came out. You're done here, Owen said, effective immediately. He turned to Paige. You're stepping in as interim supervisor. Starting tomorrow, we're stabilizing schedules, and I want a full audit of all recent orders. No more last-minute cuts, no more missed arrangements. Everyone here deserves better. Lacey looked stunned. Paige said nothing at first, just stared at him, then blinked hard. Got it, she finally said. I'll make sure it happens. Owen nodded once, then looked around the room. This isn't just about one store. I'm going to every location. No more hiding behind reports. I want to know what's really happening, and it starts here. He walked to the back, grabbed his coat, and stepped out into the night. For the first time in years, he felt like he was finally doing what his mother would have wanted. The next morning, Owen returned to the Long Beach shop at opening time. He didn't wear the glasses anymore. No apron. just a button-down shirt, jeans, and a notepad in his back pocket. Paige was already inside, sorting a shipment of wax flour and stock, her expression unreadable. She didn't pause when he walked in. "You really own this place?" she asked, not looking up. "I do." She nodded once, clipped a stem, and said, "You're lucky it didn't say half the things I wanted to say yesterday." "I know," he said, "but I heard enough." Lacey came in 10 minutes later, slower than usual. She looked at Owen cautiously. He gave her a short nod, then pulled her aside gently. "I want to talk to both of you after close," he said. "Today we just keep things moving." They opened at 9. There were only 3 of them on the floor. Paige took point, delegating calmly but firmly, refusing to let things slip. She checked every order slip herself, kept the cooler organized, and never let the register line build. There was no hesitation in her voice now. She didn't ask for permission. She acted like someone who finally had permission to trust her own judgment. But Owen noticed the strain behind it. The overcorrection. She didn't take a break, didn't eat, kept pushing because she didn't know what was next. Midday, a woman entered with 2 toddlers and a preschooler in tow. She looked flustered, carrying a folded piece of paper with a hand-drawn sketch of a bouquet. "My mom passed last week," she said, her voice low. "She always liked sunflowers and blue delphinium. This is what my daughter drew. I don't know if it's even possible." Paige knelt beside the little girl. "We can make something even better than this. You want to help me pick the flowers?" The girl nodded shyly. Owen watched in silence as Paige brought out a few stems and let the child choose. The mother's eyes welled up. She whispered a thank you as Paige walked back to the prep table. He didn't interrupt, just made a few notes and stepped outside to call someone he hadn't spoken to in a while, his regional HR lead, Celeste. "I need you to come down to Long Beach," he said. "This afternoon. Bring a printed copy of the last 4 months of scheduling changes for this location, and be ready to conduct an exit interview. We've got fallout to clean up." Celeste didn't ask questions. She just said she'd be there by 4. By closing time, the shop was quiet again. The floor was clean, the cooler stocked, and the deliveries for the next morning prepped and labeled. Paige was wiping down the counter when Owen stepped out of the back office. "Come sit," he said. She hesitated, then followed him to the small break area. Lacey joined them a moment later, still glancing nervously toward the front. "I'm not firing anyone," Owen said. "Let's get that out of the way." Lacey exhaled sharply. Paige folded her arms but relaxed her shoulders. "I brought HR in today," he continued. "Not because of you, because I want to make sure what happened here never happens again." "Wasn't just the hours," Paige said. "It was how unpredictable it got. You couldn't plan anything. Rent, groceries. You'd leave a shift not knowing if you were working the next day." "I know." "You don't," she said. "Not really. You saw some of it, but you didn't live with it for months." "You're right," Owen said, "which is why I'm not going back to the office yet. I'll be rotating through the rest of the shops over the next 2 months. Quietly. No announcements." Lacey glanced at Paige, then back at Owen. "You're going undercover again." He nodded. "It's the only way to see what's real." Paige leaned forward. "Then don't just fix this one store. There are others like this. I've heard stories from people in Torrance. Same kind of thing." "I'm tracking every location," Owen said. "But this one's where start making change." Celeste arrived at the back door with a folder under her arm. She gave Owen a brief nod and handed him the file. He flipped through the documents. The schedule changes Jenna had made weren't just last minute, they were deliberate. Paige had lost over 35 hours in the last month alone. Lacey had been cut from 5 shifts with no written record. Lewis had been left off the schedule entirely on weekends, even though he'd asked for more hours. "I'm handling this," Owen said, and handed the file back to Celeste. Later that evening, Owen called Tony, the district manager. "Hey, boss," Tony said. "Heard you stopped by Long Beach. Everything good?" "No, Tony, everything's not good." There was a pause. "What do you mean?" "I mean the supervisor you vouched for left funeral orders unfulfilled, cut hours without notice, and abandoned the floor for days. I mean employees were afraid to speak up because you told them to toughen up. You know how it is hourly jobs, they come and go. You can't baby them." Owen's voice dropped. "That attitude is the reason Jenna's out, and now I'm asking you directly, did you know this was happening?" "I mean, I knew there were bumps." "Don't play coy. Did you know she was slashing hours and ghosting the store?" "She told me she was managing labor costs." "You're not answering the question." Another pause, then, "Yes, I knew." Owen didn't hesitate. "Then you're done too, effective immediately." "You can't be serious." "You ignored every warning sign, protected your friend, and let your team rot under mismanagement. That's not leadership. That's negligence." Tony's voice rose. "You're gonna regret this. You're gonna have a staffing crisis on your hands." "I'd rather rebuild from scratch than keep people who look the other way." Owen hung up without waiting for a reply. By the next morning, the news had reached the rest of the staff. Lewis came in early and stood by the front door before clocking in. "Did I hear right?" he asked in a low voice. "You did," Owen said. "Jenna and Tony are both gone." Lewis looked down at the floor for a moment, then nodded once and walked behind the counter. Paige didn't say anything when she arrived, just rolled up her sleeves and got to work. But her pace was different. Steady, not frantic. She paused long enough to take a bite of the breakfast wrap Lewis had brought for everyone. Celeste returned later that day with a training coordinator. They began restructuring the store's operations, starting with consistent scheduling protocols. Printed schedules would now be locked in 5 days in advance and could only be changed with employee consent and written notification. The van key was reassigned to Paige, along with access to the delivery log. She was hesitant at first. "I'm not a manager," she said. "You're not yet," Owen replied, "but you're on that track if you want it." "And if I don't?" "Then I'll take that seriously too. You've got options now." By the end of the week, a temporary manager from another store arrived to help stabilize operations. Paige trained him herself. She didn't hover. She delegated. She even laughed just once when a customer knocked over a vase and tried to pretend it hadn't happened. Owen waited until the end of the day to pull her aside again. "You're doing this place proud," he said. "I'm just trying to keep it from falling apart." "You're doing more than that. You're building something better." She tilted her head, thoughtful. "What about the other stores?" "They're next." She nodded slowly. "Good." He stepped outside, the last light of sunset catching on the glass door behind him. For the first time in months, he wasn't wondering what was going wrong. He knew, and now he was doing something about it. The following Monday, Owen arrived without fanfare and waited in the car as deliveries were dropped off. The temperature had already climbed, and the inside of the van smelled faintly of damp cardboard and eucalyptus. He watched through the windshield as Paige brought out a checklist and began sorting inventory with deliberate precision. She didn't rush. She didn't pause. Inside, the shop buzzed with quiet effort. Lewis was arranging stems at the back table, his apron dusted with pollen. A new trainee, Mia, stood beside him, her movements tentative. She was fresh out of a vocational program and clearly nervous. Paige had paired her with Lewis, not out of convenience, but because Lewis had patience, something she'd quietly mentioned to Owen when he asked for her input over the weekend. Owen stepped inside and nodded to each person, pausing briefly beside the front counter, where Lacey was taping up a condolence card to a bouquet. She didn't look up right away but finally asked, "You still checking on us?" "I'm still here," he said, "but not checking, learning." She glanced at him, then returned to her task. Better that way. By noon, 2 customers had come in with custom requests, and one had a complaint about a missing arrangement from last week. Instead of deflecting, Paige pulled the order log, confirmed the mistake, and offered an immediate redo with no charge. She didn't look over her shoulder. She didn't ask for permission. Owen stepped into the office, now clean, the door open, and reviewed the new staff schedule on the corkboard. Every name had a printed copy and a timestamp. A small notebook labeled "Schedule Changes" sat on the desk, with each revision signed and explained. It was a stopgap, but it worked. More importantly, it was visible. No one could be erased quietly anymore. He called Celeste later that afternoon. "Paige has stabilized the store," he said. "What would the process be if she wanted to move into a formal leadership role?" "She'd need to complete the internal certification modules," Celeste replied. "Then shadow a lead at one of the core locations. Usually takes 3 months." "Can we start that now?" "Already got her on the list." He hung up and walked out to the prep table just as Louis was showing Mia how to spiral stems for a hand-tied bouquet. It was slow going, but she watched him closely and asked questions without hesitation. Paige passed behind them, tapped Mia once on the shoulder, and said, "Not too tight. You want the stems to breathe." Mia nodded, adjusting her grip. That night, Owen sat with Paige in the break room after close. The lights were off in the front, and the hum of the cooler was the only sound. "You running on fumes yet?" he asked. "Little bit," she said, leaning back. "But it's different now. Feels like it matters." He studied her for a moment. "You ever think about staying with the company long term?" Paige didn't answer right away. "I used to think I'd be gone by now, but I don't know. We've got kids coming and asking how to get jobs here. That didn't happen before." "What would make you stay?" She thought longer this time. Real training, not just figure it out, a raise that doesn't feel like a favor, and people like Mia not being thrown in blind. He nodded. "You'll have all 3. She raised an eyebrow. "I'm serious," he said. "Every store is getting a floor-level training program. No more trial by fire. We're also setting up a regional pay structure that ties to performance and tenure, not just location." Paige didn't smile, but something in her posture eased. "You'll lead one of those trainings," he added. She blinked. "You trust me with that?" "You've earned it." Outside, the street was quiet. The last bus rumbled past, its headlights sweeping across the shop windows. Paige stood and grabbed her bag. "Just don't expect me to go easy on the new hires," she said. "I wouldn't dare." By Thursday, the changes began spreading. Celeste and a small team rotated in and out of stores, auditing practices and speaking with employees directly. Jenna's name was already scrubbed from the system. Tony's contact was removed from the internal directory. Neither had been allowed to return to the premises. In Torrance, a florist named Vika was suspended after reports surfaced that she'd been using racial slurs toward one of the newer hires. When Owen reviewed the incident report, there wasn't a moment of hesitation. He gave the go-ahead for immediate termination and personally called the employee who had reported it. "We don't tolerate that," he said. "Not here, not ever. You did the right thing." Across the 17 locations, small signs of change took root. Printed schedules became standard. Break policies were enforced. Deliveries were double-checked by 2 employees instead of 1. Every store received a complaint log that was reviewed weekly not by district managers, but by a central accountability team reporting directly to Owen. At the Long Beach store, Mia completed her first solo bouquet without help. She didn't announce it. She just placed it on the counter and returned to her station. Paige saw it, walked over, and gave a quiet nod. "You're getting there." Lewis added a second stool to the prep table. "She's already better than I was my first month," he said. By Friday, Owen met with Celeste behind the closed doors of the regional office. "We're not done," Celeste said. "There's still resistance in 2 of the older locations. Some of the senior staff don't want to change how they've been doing things." "Then we keep showing up," Owen said. "No more hiding behind titles, no more blind spots." Celeste paused. "You still planning to go back undercover?" "Not for now, but I'll be back on the floor. Quietly, random rotations. I want every employee to know they could be working next to me on any given day." She nodded slowly. "That'll change things." "It already is." Later that evening, Owen returned to Long Beach for one final visit that week. He didn't go inside, just stood across the street and watched as the lights flicked off one by one. Paige locked the front door, checked the van, and walked toward the bus stop with Mia beside her. They were talking something about a customer who tried to pay with expired coupons, and then both laughed. Owen stood for a moment longer, then turned down the sidewalk. The company his mother had started had grown into something unrecognizable. But now, piece by piece, it was becoming something better. Not bigger, not flashier, just honest, accountable, human. The kind of place worth building. And this time, he'd make sure it stayed that way.